Hello, it's Mr. Gibbs here, back with the three names sheet. So on this particular sheet I have one name, Donald J. Trump. It's three names. Well, it's two names and an initial. And underneath there I'd like you to type in John F. Kennedy. Don't forget the dot or the period after the F, okay? The dot character after the F here, okay? So these two guys are slightly more problematic than the two names we had in the previous examples. Like before, we're going to type this in, first name, this time initial, and then a surname, okay? So the first name, just like before, left. How many characters from the left hand side will I search for the position of the space in A2 and -1 because I don't want to include the space, and I get the word Donald, and if I fill that down there I get the word John. Okay, now the initial occurs after the space, so if we find the space and +1 we get the initial. So there's always two characters in the initial, 1, 2. So what we can do here is use the mid function, equals mid, okay? Mid can cause some confusion. You have to take a look at these three things here. We have some text, which like always, which text are we going to use? Then we have a starting position from the left, which is known as start num. Starting position from the left. Well, in its simplest form, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 is where the space is. But of course 8 is where the initial starts, and then 2 for the J dot, okay? 1, 2, J dot gives me J dot. However, when I fill that down, of course, it's not going to work because Donald and John have two different lengths of names, right? So what I need to do is to make this dynamic. Instead of the 8 in there, I need to search for the space in A2, okay, and then add 1. That gets me a J dot, and likewise that'll be fine there because searches for the space, +1 and 2 characters for the initial. Right, the surname is a little bit trickier than before because this time we have 2 spaces, okay? Now, before we do this, if we have 3 names, we have 2 spaces. So if what we need to do is to remember what we did in the previous video. So if we go back to 2 names and take a look at this surname here, we have Jonathan Gibbs and we need just the surname. The standard formula is write len minus the position of the space, okay? This space here. But in this name, of course, we only have 1 space. Over here, in 3 names, we have 2 spaces, 1 and 2, okay? So what we need to do to begin with is find the position of the second space. How do I find the position of the second space? Well, there's a few ways to do that. Obviously, you need to search for it. What do you want to search for? Well, I want to search for the space in A2. If I just do that, I get the number 7, which is Donald. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th position, the space after Donald. So that gives me the position of the first space. Okay. Now I don't want that. I want the position of the second space. So this time what I can do is my third argument here, my start num, I can search, just like before, for the space in A2, like that. Okay, and my starting number is that +1. So I want to start searching 1 position after the space. So search for the space in A2, but start from the position 1 after the first space. And that gives me the number 10. Let's just go through that again. What am I doing here? I'm searching for the space in A2. Okay, and my starting number, well, that has to be this. Well, if I search for the space in A2 just on its own, we know that gave me 7. It's Donald +1, so 1 space after that, and on its own that exists just fine. Let's take a look. If I do that on its own, I get the number 7. If I add 1 to that, I get the number 8. Okay, so this whole thing here gives me 8. Right, so let's search for the space in A2, but my starting position is going to be 8, so I ignore the first one. Okay, so if I do that, it gives me the number 10, and likewise down here, if I fill it down, 8, John, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 for Kennedy. Now, how can I use this number to get my surname? Well, this formula here is the position of the last space in a 3-name text field. Okay, and what I can do is just like before, is say right from the right hand side of A2. I want the length of A2 minus the position of the last space. So it gives me that. Okay? And if I fill that down, I'll get Kennedy also. There's a few ways to do this, and we'll look at another one in a moment with the more names. Okay? But what have we learned on this sheet? Well, just like before, we did left and we did mid. Now, mid's always the one that everybody gets confused with. We have to start, it takes stuff out of the middle, and we have to start at a position from the left hand side and take a certain number of characters. Let's just have a quick look at this again. How does it work? A2, I'm starting from 1 after the space, and I'm taking 2 characters. So J dot, there's the first space, and there's the J dot, and that's mid. And we also did right, which was also in the 2 names sheet down here. And then we also did search within a search. You could call it a nested search. Okay, so search for the second space. Now, how do I search for the second space? Well, I find the first one and add 1 to it, and then that becomes my start number. So my starting number from the left hand side of this is the stuff highlighted here. When I know that, I can then search for a space, and it will give me the position of the space after the first one. Okay, so we've done a search within a search. And that's how we do 3 names. The next video will be the more names sheet, where we do more complicated stuff with people with multiple names. Just like before, I should also mention here, let's concatenate them. Well, just like before, it's the first name, concatenated with a space, concatenated with an initial, concatenated with another space, and then the surname. So we take it apart and we put it back together again. You could use the concatenate function if you wanted to. Okay, I'll be back in another video for more names in just a moment.